We're going to go ahead and start tonight's work session. We have one delegate this evening. Unfortunately, they're running behind, but that's all right. It works out well for us because we don't have a presentation tonight. So we're going to actually spend our time together looking at the agenda, and that way for our 6 o'clock meeting, we can roll hopefully right into voting. So we're going to spend, however long we need over the next hour discussing the agenda. So we'll go ahead and just go over the agenda together. Of course, first I have roll call, approval of the agenda. We do not have executive session tonight. We have the pledge of the flag and meditation with Principal Johnson from Big Ridge Elementary. And then we're actually removing our exemplars of excellence this evening. We have our board member disclaimer statement, and then we go into the approval of the consent agenda. On the consent agenda tonight, we have field trips. It looks like those are brought to us by Dr. Stewart. Do we have any questions about the field trips on tonight's agenda? Did I miss something? Oh, I'm sorry. Back up. We've got some amendments. Well, we'll go through that. I was just going to go through, just line by line, and we'll talk about yeah. Are there any questions about the field trips on the agenda? This is a good time to have the discussion. Great. Okay, next item is bids and contracts. Item 7D1K is being pulled. It's a request approval of request to approve the bid for 24-21 alternate transportation services. Are there any questions about what's being pulled, or are there any questions about what's on the agenda for bids and contracts? Yes, go right ahead, Mrs. Thurman.
I'm sorry. I had this printed off that I was going to pull, and I went off and left it in my copier at home. Is this where the updated job classifications is? I'm sorry, I'm just it's on the next one. Okay.
I don't believe so.
It's
It
on the
is.
next one. Okay. It's under administrative. Okay.
Okay. So no hold comments on that. All right, Mr. Groen.
I just testing 1 2. I had a question on. There's supposed to be some rationale attached to this, but there is none. So there was just some differences.
This has been pulled.
I know it's been pulled,
Yeah.
but depending upon some of their trip fees, per mile fees, all this, I was just wondering why one company was chosen over another when there were, it seemed to me, some significant differences. And I was expecting some rationale for why the two companies were chosen. I can understand the one company.
Ms. Graham? Have Brandon come up
Yeah.
and address that for you. Good evening, everybody doing okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we pulled it tonight. We have some work to do to it. We're gonna bring it back in July. We have, in the past, we've used multiple companies. We try to go with the cheapest one, obviously, that does the best work for our students. The Siren Safe has currently ran with American Logistics, and then they changed their name to Everdriven Transportation. They are a little higher, but again, after having some conversation with some board members this morning, we're going to pull it and resubmit it in July.
Okay. It was just, there were just, sometimes it was just little things like,
Like the rates and fees.
well, some of the rates and fees, and then, let's see, on page, it's like River North Transport, it says car seat safety vests. Are we talking about seat belts?
Correct. Some students require seat belts. What the district has done for many years, instead of paying that fee, is the transportation department will go and purchase car seats. Therefore, it saves the fee. We do not have to pay the fee to the company for car seats because we buy our own a whole lot cheaper than paying that fee. So that fee would not be for us. We do ask that they put it in there in case there was an emergency come up where a belt broke on our car seat or something to that effect, but we normally supply our own car seats.
Yeah, well, River North is putting NA under that, so,
Yes, sir.
and I would assume that they don't, I don't want to assume, but does that mean that they just don't have them?
That is correct, sir, that they would not supply them.
Okay. So, on the case, that was pretty significant for me, because on the cases where we needed it,
Yes, sir, that particular company does
or
not.
that particular route. Okay.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Well, if I have any other questions, because I actually forgot at home,
Yes, sir.
this, I'll get with you. Is that
Okay, sounds good.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
All right, good deal. Are there any other questions about this item? No? Okay. Are there any other items to be discussed under bids and contracts? Okay. All right. We also have financial reports, budget amendments. Is there any discussion under budget amendments?
Yes.
Yes, great.
Uh,
Please, feel free to press your button. Because I heard multiple yeses. Okay, Mr. Keene.
So, under the budget thing, we're just questioning the amount being spent for architectural either designing or suggestions or whatever for the new Cigna. It's got that in there, and that never did come before us previously? Or is that something done? Because it's not the county's architect.
No, it's not. So we've had a couple conversations in the past about looking at this differently. What we've done traditionally is hired an architect that does 100% of the plans, and then we bid out for a general contractor there. We ran into this a little bit with Tyner, where we felt like if we had brought in a consultant early to help us make sure that the architect is not putting things in that we could do cheaper or at a better price. And so this is a little bit, you're right, it's a different process than what we've done in the past, is to bring in the consultant along with the architect. We're not going to draw out 100% of the plans and then look at bidding it out to see where there can be cost savings with the builder. This idea came from a visit to Bradley County. I think a couple of you have been to their PI Center.
Right.
They did this process, and Mr. Bennett, I think, helped them through the legal part of it, and they were able to see significant savings. So with a project like Cigna, we thought this would be a good beta test to see if that process would provide us some savings when we do significant renovations or even new builds.
Okay. Because that's different from CSLA's procedure and stuff.
100% different.
Okay, Mrs. Thurman?
Okay, well, yeah, that's just what I wanted to know, why we were doing, I guess you answered that. I still say we'd never done that quite like that before, and I just wondered, I knew, because that school, I think, is in Joe's district. Did we figure that out, Joe? Is that building gonna be in your district, Joe?
The school currently is in my district. I don't know if the building we're talking or referencing is in my
Gonna be
district.
in your building, okay. And I didn't remember,
District 8 in mine.
it's yours now?
Yeah, unless they gerrymandered again.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
They gerrymandered East Brainerd out of my district.
The Goodwin Road runs in front of East Brainerd Elementary School.
Right.
The Cigna property is, so they're on opposite sides of the road.
Right.
So before the latest, redesign of political districts, East Brainerd,
Was in
the
eight.
line with the school, the physical school was not in my zone.
in eight.
It was the back entrance.
Right.
Was in my district. And most of the families that went there lived in my district, but the school itself wasn't in my district.
Right.
And now, if the line is on the other side, on the frontage of that school would now is mine. But I'm not sure that
Well, I was just
the
trying
newly
to-
acquired property is.
Yeah, that
in
was
the
trying
same
to figure out who would be consulted about it. If you got the architect, who was consulted about it? I guess that's what I was wanting to know. If does the school board member get drawn into that, to who, the discussion?
We can. So, I mean, essentially what the process is the architect, instead of drawing 100% of the plans and then us bidding it out to a builder, they draw about 30% of the plans, and they work with that
Okay.
consultant to bid that piece out. And then when the builder comes in, they'll finish up to 100%, and that way there's agreement on places where we can save costs,
Yeah.
right? Because what we're doing now is we bid it out, and then we don't have a mechanism to value engineer it properly to look at where savings are going. Again, this from Bradley County, what they did with the PI Center. Scott, I don't know if you've got any other details that
Sure.
I'm missing.
What it boils down to is under Tennessee law, school boards. You're tapping. Under Tennessee law, school boards are authorized to retain professionals to advise them on a lot of things. One of the things that Bradley did was they recognized that no one on their cabinet is a builder. No one on their board was a builder. And so they retained someone to basically serve as an owner's representative who was the superintendent and was the board chair through the process of going through and having these questions about why are we doing it this way? Why aren't we doing it that way? And so it brought to bear a lot of expertise that the board in that moment didn't have. And certainly the educational leaders of the school system didn't have. And as a result, they were able to drive down a lot of costs and do some things that were really quite unique. That the Pi Center has, it leases out space to the state of Tennessee. It leases out space to ROTC outfits. They're local businesses that lease out space. And that consultant has gone out and done all of these things for the board as part of the business office because it's unique.
Yeah, well, I don't have a problem with any of that. The only thing I don't want stuff going on in the schools in my district I don't know about. I don't like surprises. I really, really don't like surprises. And I also don't like, a lot of times I see things going on at other schools and I'm thinking, where did that come from? I'll take Rivermont, for example. We were going to close Rivermont. Next thing I knew, we were renovating. I'm like, what happened?
Sure.
The board didn't know anything about it. So things like that, I don't like surprises like that. And, I just think that whoever the school board member is at least ought to be made aware if something's going on in a school in their district. And that's why I was wondering where that came from, because
Sure.
I hadn't seen it before.
Yeah, I assumed your question was because that is a very different spin from what the board
Yes.
typically does. And it's just a recognition that there's an expertise here that we don't have in-house.
Well, and that's what caught to see the term architect there isn't, but when you see the word consultant there, I would think the architect and his company is the consultant, but now I see what you're saying, as far as
You
the
want
other
someone
area
with
of
architectural expertise,
Right.
but you don't necessarily need an architect.
Right.
Because what you have here is the person basically becomes an owner's rep. And I don't know how familiar you all are with the AIA contracts that we enter into all the time with architectural companies, but there are a lot of decisions that have to be made in real time by someone with expertise. Justin's team is great with that.
Yeah, I do want to point out, this isn't bringing an architect and that consultant to you. This is just setting the
Right.
funds aside so that when we do that, and those conversations would get more in depth. But
Exactly.
right, this isn't y'all approving an architect. It's setting those funds aside so when we get to that point, we can. Again, to the point of like talking with the board, this is the Cigna property that we've been talking about for 18 months almost. And so once we purchased it, we had those conversations about renovating it for the school space. This is a step to set funds aside so that we can hire an architect and hire that consultant.
And I'll be happy to discuss this with y'all in greater detail. You just give me a call, we can talk about it. Because it is a fundamentally different animal from what you've done, but also renovating a building of this size is a fundamentally different project.
Mrs. Robinson?
Yes, and I'm sure there's a lot difference in renovation and building from new up. So am I visualizing this correctly? This is the builder, this is a need, you're the architect, tell us how we can get there.
It is, but again, like, to the cost savings point, I mean, you guys have asked these questions in the past, like, did the architect put something in there that looks really good, but functionally doesn't make a difference and it costs us a lot of money? The job of the consultant is to say, functionally, what do we need in this building? How do we do it in the most cost-effective way?
Mr. Groen?
Madam Chair, I believe our delegate is here.
Yes, I'd like to get to this section and then we'll
Okay.
bring her up. Thank you. Okay, are there any more questions on the budget amendment or comments? Well, I'll add a comment. As someone who's in real estate development, I actually highly recommend using someone like this consultant, because at the end of the day, whenever you don't have someone in the middle between the architect and the GC that's really driving the vision and understands like a project of this scale, that is how you go out of budget and how you make a lot of mistakes with building something at the scale that we're trying to build. So, I just want to state that like it is common practice, and I do think it's a good move. Whereas we have great people on our staff that, work in maintenance and, do a lot of other things related to facilities, we do not have anyone that is a development minded person on this team. And at the end of the day, like, we're in the business of education, and we don't need to have somebody on our staff doing that, but to bring in a consultant is a good move in my opinion, so. Okay, we'll move on to next item. Let's see, we have school outstanding obligations. Were there any comments about that? Next is Director of Federal Programs. Federal Programs Consolidated Federal Application. Any comments or questions around that? No? Okay, and then we'll move into board policies, second and final read. We are open for discussion, so feel free to light up that box.
For the cell phone?
But that's it. Oh, that's it.
You're welcome to light up your box and address any policy that you'd like to address on the list. Mrs. Thurman.
Okay, so I just didn't realize they'd put that right there. I thought it was on down probably under board matters. Okay, the cell phone policy. I cannot vote for it like it is. There's a couple of things here. Let's see. Right here, students may possess devices so long, it's on line 26, so long as devices are only seen, heard, or utilized when directed by appropriate school staff. Okay, first of all, what is appropriate school staff? There's a lot of teachers, also some principals, that I'm afraid we're going to get right back into what we're getting into now. They're a whole lot more lenient at their school than other schools are. And we're going to get into that, well, they can use a phone there, but we can't use it here, or a student go from one school to the other and get in trouble for doing something at one school that he didn't in another school. Like I say, I thought the whole purpose of this was to get us a uniform, and I just don't think that this is going to get us there. First of all, I don't know who appropriate school staff is. And then I personally don't like the line for grades 9 through 12. Each individual school may choose to allow cell phones in designated areas during lunch period. I don't see why that's necessary. And then there again, each individual school. We're getting back into one school may do it, the other school may not. I just don't know why we want to make this complicated. Some people say, well, the teacher's going to have to be policing this all the time. Well, to me, this makes it even that more difficult, especially if lunch periods are at different times, and trying to figure out who's on lunch period and who's not on lunch period, and who's supposed to be going back to class and who's still standing around on their phone. I think that's where you get into the problem. If you just say no cell phones, I thought that would be a whole lot more simple. That's just my opinion.
Okay. Point of clarification for myself, since I wasn't here on Monday. This is the latest version that came out of Monday's meeting. Am I understanding that right?
Yes, the way we left it on Monday, the last line that Ms. Thurman referenced for grades 9 through 12, that was kind of a question, and so what we decided was to add it, because then it would be easier if you guys wanted to mark through that last line, then we could just edit that last line out.
Okay. All right.
See, and I wanted to
go
leave
ahead.
it out and add it if we wanted to add it back. But
You wanted to leave it out and add it back,
Add it back if we thought it was necessary. That was
like
what I
in
wanted to do.
December or so, whenever it's reviewed. Is that what you're getting?
Yeah,
What you're
I
saying?
mean, if
Okay.
we wanted to add it back on, it's a lot easier to add something on and take it away.
When I say take it off, I'm
Yeah.
meaning tonight. It's
Right.
easier tonight to edit if someone wanted to make a motion to.
Just for clarity, Ms. Moody said we're going to leave it on because it's easier to delete it than create text on the fly. So that's why it was left on.
Okay. Mrs. Robinson?
I would like to see more uniformity. I think the principal or his or her designate is enough, as opposed to say the appropriate school staff. Like Ms. Thurman says, who is going to determine the appropriate school staff? I would like to see the principal or the person that he designates to be his or her designee. And then I would like to omit the lunch period.
Where are you pulling that from, Mrs. Robinson?
Okay, the
Line
appropriate
29.
staff is line 27.
Also, Yeah.
And then 30 says that the principal may grant permission to use the cell phone as a device to assist with instruction. Like Mr. Connor gave the example of maybe an art class or a dance class might use it in the program. So I think it's good that we might use that. However, the Chromebook takes priority over the cell phone. But the lunch period, so much can happen during the lunch period, and if we're going to try to make it concrete and uniform, I'd like to see it deleted.
Thank you. Mr. Keen?
Well, and I do appreciate you grouping it all together. It makes it easier, and I think K through 8 is definitely addressed appropriately. I'm gonna say again, so, 22 years as a administrator, the last 15 of those cell phones were present, and always became a problem. And as the phone gets smarter, the problems get bigger. But when you take seniors or juniors or even freshmen and sophomores, you take 9 through 12, and again, we each have our own opinion, so I'm going to give mine. You're like, and truly, we have secondary students that are addicted to these phones, and what we're doing is still going to cause policing, and it's going to cause administrative issues and that. I think to allow them a set time at lunch when is their, it's their cool down and stress relief time for many students. And I know somebody's going to say, well, they need to be talking to other students. Yeah. But for many students, that is their stress relief time, is to take a look at their phone and answer their texts or whatever. I don't see anything wrong with that last 31 and 32, allowing 9 through 12. And that's, again, just my opinion. But I think the rest of it, and again, what Faye said, I think utilizing a common language in both of those, and the buck stops with the administrator, not a teacher. I think in every school, it's the administrator that should be making those decisions. Don't leave it up to the teachers. So.
Thank you. Mr. Connor?
So I think that, we've gone through this in 3 meetings, and we've gone through it in 2 policy meetings, so 5 total. So I think that we've had a lot of opinions on this. I think as it's written, it is a strong start. I think that I am excited that we've added quarterly reviews to make sure that we've got this correct throughout the school year, that we're learning from it. I like that we have made allowances to make sure that if there is a situation where a Chromebook cannot do the job that's needed to educate the children, that we have the allowance to let that happen. I'm going to vote for this in the way that it's written right now.
Thank you. Mrs. Jones? I think it... I think you just need to scoot on
It's not
down.
my mic, it's not on. Because it's not my mic. My mic's supposed to be right here. Well, anyway, I don't have to necessarily have a mic. I'm just glad to see a more uniform policy, that's just one policy, and, that was my thing. I have my little notes right here from last month where I asked for that, so I'm just glad to see that. And I would also, like to, I like the idea of the clear, language, principal and or his designee. I think, however, in line 26 and 27, where it says students may possess devices so long as devices are only seen, heard, or utilized when directed by appropriate school staff, I can understand the rationale for saying that, in that if that's like a coach or maybe Success Academy, I mean, like there are often opportunities where it may not be your specific administrator right there, and or his designee or his or her designee who may be an AP or dean of students or a CE coach, a student support coach. It might be the coach. It might be your physical education teacher. It might be the cafeteria manager. I mean, it could be the SRO. It could be someone else that is appropriate school staff and is supposed to be there, but might not actually be able to be this particular person and or their designee because they may not actually physically need to be there. So I could understand the rationale for saying appropriate school staff, because depending on where they are in the building at that specific time, where the phone may be seen, heard, or being utilized at the wrong time, it might not be the principal or his or her designee that sees that. Which then gives our staff support, once again, to enforce, like I said, the rule.
All right. Mrs. Black?
I wanted to address, we got some emails, I believe today, with a request to add language about having the phone turned off. And I wanted to reiterate why we made the decision at the last meeting not to have that language and instead have it be seen, heard, or utilized. Because if it's in the policy, the teachers have to police it and enforce it. And enforcing a phone being completely off is just going to be much more difficult for teachers to manage than just having a phone put away and not on silent and not being utilized. So I wanted to reiterate for the public why we made that decision last time and why it's not in the policy. Because when we write it in the policy, it has to be enforced.
Okay, and Mrs. Thurman?
Yes, well, I think that they've just about, I've already said my piece about it, but, like I say, and I understand Caritza's thing about appropriate school staff, but I have been around long enough to know there's such a vast difference in principals, such a vast difference in some classroom teachers, and I can just see some people taking this, and like it says, in designated areas during lunch period. Where's the designated area during lunch period? Like I say, I just see that all these kids, they come to lunch at different times, mingling around during the time. We talked about this Monday night about a young girl that got up to go to the restroom during lunch, and some other girls told her that so-and-so's on her way to the restroom, and there's a big fight in the restroom because they know where they're going. They tell each other where everybody is in the classroom, where the SRO officers are in schools. They make drug deals. They do all kinds of things on cell phones. They make pictures of tests. They send it to their friends. You think they can't do that at lunchtime in about 2 seconds? They can go to the bathroom and do it for that matter. But we cannot throw in, like I say, I'm tired of throwing in the white towel on so many things in the school system because as adults we can't seem to be able to control children. Like the language, I'll use the language. I mean, the F word is just used beyond my belief in our school system. I am just blown away that we have just thrown in the white towel and just allow such language to be used in our schools. And I'm for one, I'm not ready to throw in the white towel on the cell phone towel because I'm afraid I'm going to make some children mad, or I'm going to make some adults mad, or going to make some parents mad, or we're about educating children. And I think that cell phones at school is the biggest deterrent to education that we have. You think that it enhances education? I think it deters education because kids get so caught up in all of that, and there's so much bullying that goes on, and so many really, we've had instances of kids taking pictures in locker rooms, under stalls in bathrooms. I mean, we've seen it all. And I just think if we just say, I thought it'd be just very simple. We just made it so hard, just no cell phones. And then if we want to add some back, add something back. But I say we don't have to reinvent the wheel. This is going on all over the state of Tennessee. It's not like we're doing something wonderful here. Everybody else has already done it. We're one of the last ones. And we're just making it way harder than it ought to be.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
I'm just afraid that the way this is written is going to kind of be like our code of acceptable behavior, where we're so inconsistent with regard to how that code is enforced. One principal does it one way, another principal does another way, and kids talk to each other from different schools, and they know what goes on. And So I think the way this is written still leaves a lot of leeway for that to happen. I was at lunch today, and I walked into this restaurant, and there was a mom and dad and 3 kids, and they're all 5 on their cell phones. People don't talk to each other anymore, and then we're just enabling that when we say, let's let them go to lunch and talk on their phones, or so they don't learn social skills, they don't socialize because they're in their phone. I'm not going to vote for this, and I just think that I agree with what others have said, that we need to be about literacy and math and science and not social media. And I'm just afraid it's such a distraction. And the way this is written, one principal and another principal are going to handle things very differently, and then we continue to have confusion.
Yep. Mr. Connor?
I make a motion to vote on this bill as written.
We are not voting right now.
Sorry.
We are,
Oh, I got excited. Okay.
wow.
I remove my motion.
Wow. Clearly a first-year board member.
Yes.
Clearly a first-year board member. Mr. Wingate.
Hey, that's okay. I've done the same thing.
So in regards to lines 26 and 27, does it make sense to be redundant there if that were to be the wish of the board, and say, students may possess devices so long as they're only seen, heard, or utilized when directed by the principal or his or her designee.
That would be the first time it's being said. So
Right,
that point,
but I'm saying then it would be,
redundant.
yes. Or do we just, or would it be, if it's the will of the board, just to remove that line altogether, and the beginning of that section starts, with devices will be stored, however that reads. And then, when technology is utilized to support the instruction of standards in the classroom, yada, 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 the principal, his, her designee, so that, line 26 is gone. And then that appropriate school staff of 27 is gone. Like I said, the whole section just starts with the word devices. And then I will say, as far as, lines 31 and 32, my preference, I think I said this at the policy meeting Monday night, my preference would be for there to not be any phones accessed at all during the school day. I'm not a fan of allowing them during lunch. But I will say at this point, if we can come to a consensus on a cell phone policy, I'm for that, just because we've not ever had one. And I'd love to just get it a policy in place tonight, and then if we need to come back, we can. I've learned on this board there are plenty of things that I would do differently if I were doing them, but also have to work with other people and be able to get some things done. So those were my 2 points there. Just again about maybe the deletion of some of that, and then just my desire to see us, let's get a cell phone policy tonight.
Mr. Grohl?
Just to understand what Dr. Wingate just said, I kind of agree with students may possess devices so long as devices are not seen. It should be not seen,
That's the way it was.
heard, or utilized, period, and strike when directed by appropriate school staff, because that's being redundant for what's in 29 through 31. And then as you said, Joe, devices should be stored. In other words, we're changing the word only to not, or not be, seen, heard, or utilized, striking when directed by appropriate school staff. And if we're going to allow instruction in a classroom, and I guess this goes to you, Ben, wouldn't the principal grant a teacher is teaching a particular class and not necessarily a student? So on line 30, I would want to strike student and replace it with teacher. So, I mean, I'm just tossing that out there, but on line, in other words, on line 26, 27, 26, change the word only to not be seen. So strike only and put not be, and then or utilize period, strike when directed by appropriate school staff, because that's redundant for line 29 and 30. But on line 30, the principal would be granting a particular teacher in a particular class. And, you know, we go back to the example at Howard Connect, and I know other schools. I know Red Bank Elementary School. They do kind of the same thing in the 4th and 5th grade. So
Hey,
I would.
Mr. Groen, I think Dr. Robertson wants to maybe address some of the things you're pointing
I
out.
mean, I think to Dr. Wingate's point and to a point Mr. Groen is making is just strike the first sentence and start that paragraph with devices.
So
And it's redundant,
Strike the
but
whole
then
thing.
to Mr. Groen's second point in that line, essentially what he's saying is, makes sense. The principal would give the teacher permission and for example, in the art class, the principal would say to the teacher, it's okay in this lesson for your students to use the device. It's not the principal going to the students. That does make sense.
So the principal, are you saying the principal may, or his designee may grant a teacher permission to use the cell phone as a device to assist instruction? Or the teacher may grant a student?
Yeah, the teacher
No,
asks the students
The
to use the phone for instruction.
okay, so instead of the principal may grant a student, okay.
The only thing I would add about the first sentence coming out, I do think that if we do that in that line, we need to put something about only, like, not seen or heard, because we don't want kids having their phones in their backpack with a ringer on.
Right.
Yeah, that's got to be in there.
So, Dr. Robinson, you're saying devices should not be seen, heard, or utilized and must be
Be
stored
stored.
in
Yes,
closed
sir.
pockets? Yeah.
Okay. What-
Okay.
Okay, well, so that's actually what I wanted to ask about. So I do have 2 board members who seem to have similar opinions, so that could be simply a motion to make a change, but is it more productive for Shannon to make changes and then put it back in front of us at time of voting and we vote? Or do we actually need to go through the process of motioning with those edits when it comes time to vote? Feels more productive to have Shannon make edits and we vote on that version or not vote on that
What I was
version.
gonna suggest is that if we have a brief break.
We
maybe-
should.
Maybe we make the edits and then.
Come
that's
back.
like- That's
Yeah.
like final
Volley.
draft. and
Yeah.
Someone can move to adopt the final draft,
Okay.
even though I think calling it a final draft is probably too.
Okay, so obviously I can't take a vote on that right now, but it feels like there is support to go in that direction. Okay, I feel like there's support,
With
so let's
one-
move in that direction.
With one small caveat.
I don't know, Ben.
I like what Larry said more than striking the whole sentence because of what Dr. Robertson was discussing, because of what Jill said. So Jill said that we need to make sure that we're not telling the principals, the teachers, that they need to police this. So we do need to leave in the way that Larry said it, of not seen or heard, because of what Dr. Robertson just said, because we have to have a place for them to be. So
Okay.
we shouldn't strike the whole line,
Did you-
just
So
that.
can I,
Did you
can I
guys catch
read
that?
back and see if essentially what
Absolutely.
we're saying? So something along the lines of devices should not be seen or heard and should be stored in closed pockets, backpack, purses, blah, blah, blah. Starting 29, when technology used last sports instruction standards, classroom use Chromebooks should prioritize over cell phones. The principal or his or her designee may grant a teacher permission to use a cell phone as a device to assist with instruction at his or her discretion. And those are the two edits. Because the teacher would then give students.
It's just semantics, right?
That's right.
It's semantics.
Basically the same
Okay.
thing's happening with the
Okay.
different wording.
If I could comment, I live with those little words. I do think that granting the teacher permission to use a cell phone is different from granting a student permission to use a cell phone. So I think that word does need to say student.
Okay.
If a teacher approaches a principal ahead of time and asks and says, I'm thinking about having the kids use this in the lesson, then the teacher becomes the principal's
Becomes-
designee.
That's exactly right.
And that designee has to grant the student's
That's
permission.
exactly right. That's how I understood Dr. Robertson's proposal.
Okay. Are we on the path? Okay, excellent. Mr. Groen, I have your light on, but it may be left over. Do you still have comments to make? Great. Okay, I don't have any lights on now. Are there any more comments on this topic? Okay. I actually have been relatively silent on the issue, so I do want to actually make a couple comments. Number one, I do want to express gratitude to all 11 or 10 of you. This has been probably the hardest policy for me in the last 7 years to work on, and I think that that's because this is a topic that honestly is just like, near and dear to us, and for various reasons. Like, number one, some of us have children in the home today, and so this is a hot topic even as for myself, who's got an incoming middle schooler. But then, in general, we all think about these policies from the viewpoint of even what it was like for us in school, and what's important and what wasn't important. And so I think that's why it's controversial, but it's so important. And I just want to tell you guys, thank you so much for the really hard work. Mr. Groen, you've been really vocal on this topic, and rightfully so, and it's been an important topic, so I just want to tell you thank you on that. Mr. Wingate, thank you for getting us to where we are today, and I'm hopeful that we will pass a policy tonight. So, hint, hint. The only other thing I'm just going to mention is that, I think that one of the reasons why this is such a difficult policy is because we all probably agree that students really don't understand how to best use technology because they're technology natives, they were born into it, and we were not given an instruction guide as parents, raising them up in this technology-driven world. And so, I do think that at some point along the way, it would be really great if there was a technology health course that was offered to students, whether that's something that Hamilton County Schools offers or it's just some type of a resource given to families. But that's my kind of primary takeaway from this process, is that what I see is that at the end of the day, as a community and as a society, we really don't understand how technology impacts us and the best ways to use it, and our kids definitely don't understand. So I just wanted to kind of plant that seed and hope that maybe the leadership will do something with that. So
Tiffany, can I just affirm?
Absolutely.
In the course of learning for the student support coaches this year is this exact.
Okay.
The healthy use of technology and
Okay.
social media with a parent support piece is in part of their learning this year.
Well, I welcome that support as a parent, so thank you.
Madam Chair, do you need a motion to bring the final draft to?
So there's no motioning right now. Yep.
need anything to bring a final draft? Do we need to say
We should not.
Shannon over there typing, she working on it.
Right. Hopefully that new version just replaces what's on our agenda, and there should not be a motion needed, so
Can I say one more thing?
absolutely.
I
Yes.
don't want to kick a dead horse here, and I get it, we need to have a policy. But, I'm sorry. I get it, I appreciate Joe, what he said, we need to adopt a policy. But I want to say one more time, that I don't think they need them at lunchtime. And it's so much easier, it's gonna be so much easier to develop our policy, and if we need to go back and give them something later on, then it's gonna be much easier to give them something later on than it is gonna be take something away later on. So, just what it's worth. I'm done.
Okay, and Mrs. Thurman?
Okay, and I agree with Joe wholeheartedly. Joe, you're a smart man. That's exactly what I think, so that shows how smart he is. I absolutely agree. It's a whole lot easier to give it than to take it away. And like I say, having a policy is one thing, but I think if we're gonna do it, we need to do it right, and I think lunchtime is the worst time for them to have a phone.
Thank you. Mr. Groen, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
It's
but-
okay.
But with what Mr. Smith said, if you would look at the research that the Tennessee State Board Association helped me with of all 140 school districts, when they say no cell phones, you can have them, but they have to be turned off. The majority of school districts in the entire state, that's what their policy is. And if you looked at that information that, I had sent all of you, you can see that it's pretty clear that they don't let kids use cell phones unless it's directly involved with some sort of classroom instruction. And I just agree with Mr. Smith and Mrs. Thurman that should be the policy, and that should be the expectation for the principal and the assistant principals at all of our schools. That would be the policy. No. And, and you've got them in case of emergency. But most of these all say, don't have it, turn it off when you get to school. I understand what Mrs. Black is saying about, having them on, okay, but not seeing her utilized. And period, not even at lunch. So anyway, that is statistical fact. It is just out there if you look.
Thank you. Okay, let's pause. We're going to go ahead and let our delegate come up and speak. I told her that we would do that in the middle of the agenda session. So I'm going to turn it over to, who are you? Mr. Smith. And let him read our delegate statement, and then we'll resume our agenda session after that. So feel free to come to the mic, please.
And this is Victoria LaBruno, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, Ms. LaBruno, just real quickly, thank you for your interest in addressing the Hamilton County School Board of Education. During your presentation, please address the board as a whole, not individual board members or administrators. Also, do not present complaints or concerns you have about an employee of the school system. If you wish to voice those complaints and concerns, contact the central office and ask for a meeting with the superintendent. If you are criticizing an individual employee, I will interrupt you and ask you to refrain. If you continue to criticize individual employees, or if your remarks are in error or become repetitive, I may interrupt you. Please limit your remarks to 5 minutes. We'll give you a 1-minute warning. Clock over here is operational as well. So you may begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for adjusting. Doggo had to go to emergency vet, and we all know how scary that can be, those of us that are dog owners. My name is Victoria LaBruno, and I've been a proud educator of Eastlake Elementary School for the last 5 years, and I'm about to start my 6th year at my home away from home. Today, I would like to talk to you about the perception of Hamilton County schools. When I first started looking for school districts after graduating college, I was immediately drawn to Hamilton County schools. It was a big district that claimed to be diverse and inclusive. I started the interview process and eventually got hired at Eastlake. I absolutely love my school and the culture and community we have. Our school motto is community, caring, growth, in that order. We live out that motto every day. In the last year, I have been severely disappointed in the district I am an educator in. In the last school year, I have watched hate being spewed from this podium, and I've also watched as other groups have stood up against the hate. While I am not part of any group, I am an educator who is saying enough is enough. While I am a believer in First Amendment rights, there is a point where lines are being crossed, and I believe that line is consistently being crossed. This podium is being used to spew hate, and nothing is being done. When is enough enough? Standing here today at this podium is probably going to put a target on my back, but at this point, I cannot stay silent any longer. I talked with someone I have a lot of admiration and respect for before coming here today. This person told me that if I'm expecting change from my speech, that I would probably be disappointed. But this person did say that if I was here to advocate, then there would be no disappointment, and knowing my heart, this person knew I would not be disappointed. With a little bit of time left, I want to tell you a little more about me. My name is Victoria Labruno, and sitting behind me is the person I love, Becca. Some in this room would rather me cease to exist than to live a happy life loving who I love. And to that I say, I pulled myself out of the darkness of hatred and built a strength that is allowing me to speak here today. You see, I'm 27 years old, and I've spent the last 9 years fighting to be where I am today. I didn't have representation. I didn't have people being visible who are like me. What I did have was hatred and unkindness demonstrated for the community I am a part of. Why am I telling you this? So maybe hearing it from an educator of this district helps you to understand why representation and visibility are so important. Queer kids exist in this district. Queer families exist in this district. Queer educators give their time and exist in this district. Their eyes are watching, their ears are listening, and their hearts are feeling. And right now, the perception of Hamilton County Schools isn't the greatest. Right now, many are seeing that Hamilton County Schools is letting hatred be spewed at this podium under the guise of protecting kids. I'm telling you right now, no child needs to be protected from me because I am queer. Just because I have a sticker on my laptop that says y'all means all with some rainbow hearts doesn't mean that I support pedophilia. What it does mean is that I support inclusion of all who are going to be kind and show respect with a little extra love to a community that needs it. In closing, I would like to end by saying I know my words could be twisted, or my words and a picture of me could be posted all over social media for people to say things like, off with her head, and other cruel comments could be made like what happened to someone else. I hope knowing that helps to deepen your understanding of how strongly I feel about the perception of this district. Diversity and inclusion welcome here. I'll believe it when I truly see it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Labruno, and thank you for working with us on the flexibility of the schedule today. So, okay, let's pick back up where we were. We were under consent agenda. We're at item F, grant application request from Dr. Brown for Teacher and School Leader Incentive Program. Are there any questions or comments on that item? No? Okay, great. All right, and I'm going to move into administrative business matters. We have a request for new and updated job class descriptions. Do we have comments on that? Okay, Mr. Keene.
So a little clarity. These jobs that are listed, I'm just going to throw one out as an example. Director of Family and Community Engagement. We already have that position. Is this just changing the description, or is this asking for another position to go along with the one we already have?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Madam Chair, Madam Chairwoman, members of the board. So this memorandum for our job description is just an opportunity for us to update our job descriptions. So all these are not new positions, but part of our strategy for the talent acquisition is every 3 years we want to update our job description so it's really clear to our employees their expectations. So all these jobs are in existence.
Thank you.
Mrs. Thurman?
Yes, do any of these job descriptions, does this change the pay scale?
Like I said, all these are currently in the budget that was approved. There's a couple job descriptions where, if you look at the human resources, journalist 1 and 3, all of our journalists currently are at a 2. And so if one of those positions was vacated, then it could change a salary at that point, but no.
Mrs. Robinson?
I was gonna ask the same question. So you're saying it's in the budget, and if they were promoted, then it would increase. Should someone leave and someone be promoted, then naturally that is an increase.
Yeah, exactly right. Now I go back to the example of the human resources 1, 2, and 3. By chance, I lose an applicant or an employee that's at a journalist 2, and we hire someone that's just new to the profession. They'll come in at a journalist 1, so therefore that salary is going to be a decrease.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Keen?
I would like, I haven't gone into it, so you can save me I'm a slow reader. What is a resource facilitator? What is that position? Because I have not heard of that one before.
Well, I'm going to allow Ms. Moody to come up and explain that role.
All right.
It's a position that we wanted to offer to schools to use in their supplemental budgets. And so it would be somebody that helps manage Chromebooks or asset management, things like that in the school system or in the school itself. So it's not like a district-wide position, but it's one that could be purchased with supplemental funds if that's the need of their school.
Okay,
So we wanted the job description to be approved, so it's available.
So we haven't had this position before, but it's open through the supplemental funding.
Correct.
Okay, I didn't think I'd heard of it before.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Can I clarify? Mary Ellen told me that's not the position we're talking about, so never mind.
Okay.
Yeah, we've actually, somebody's been functioning this as a working title. It's basically to help us administer in the office. It's just the title that we had been using. It was like a senior staff accountant. Or we had like a staff accountant senior and a senior staff accountant, and they were very different jobs. So this was getting a title that was more aligned with the actual work, and it's helping to look at positions or budgets and help supporting departments versus a senior staff accountant's actually in the finance team kind of doing the back office accounting. So it's a current chair that we have. They've been operating like that, but that was not the actual title in the job description, so it's just clarifying that. So there is a resource, I know a lot of the words, that's one of the reasons we're trying to clear this so we have specific words. It's this chair. There is a resource management specialist, I think is what Shannon was talking about, and those are in the schools to help with the technology.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Okay. Are there any more questions about that job description? Okay. We'll move on to observance of federal and state holiday Juneteenth memo. This, if approved by the board, this will not take place until June 19th of 2024, which I believe, obviously doesn't impact the school calendar, but it would impact summer reach. Is that right? Okay. Mrs. Thurman.
Yeah, just wanted to know, are they trading a day off for that, or is that just going to be another day off?
We'll have to work with summer reach scheduled next year. I don't expect the state to change the 20-day minimum, and so it may be that we have to extend the other days or add a day somewhere on the front end or back end.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Robinson.
Well, some companies have a certain number, and employees can choose the holidays within that number. Is this going to be within a number or in addition to?
It's in addition to the federal holidays that we already recognize.
Okay.
Mr. Keen.
And then how will that affect the administrative calendar? Because like principals work year round.
Yeah, so it'll be an addition to the federal holidays that we already recognize.
All right. Thank you.
Mrs. Thurman.
So that's a paid holiday?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Moving on into administrative matters, item B, Washington Hills facility lease. Do we have any comments or questions? Great. Moving into board matters, proposed school name corrections. Do we have comments or questions? Okay. And the first read on a number of policies. Feel free to light up your box for any policy that you'd like to discuss on this list. All right. And then our final item is the school calendar for the 2024-2025 school year, second reading. Do you have any comments or questions? Mrs. Black.
Okay. I had some questions about what's changed over the years when it comes to professional development days. Like when it used to be that when we had when we built up the spare days or whatever for weather, that if they weren't used, the teachers were just given the day off, and now it's professional development.
No, ma'am, that's not correct. So when we build stockpile days, we're able to use some of those for professional development, which is what we've done in the past. But so there's a common misconception that stockpile days, that if we don't take them, teachers aren't getting paid. It's actually the opposite of them. If we take them, they're getting paid, right? And so we, to my knowledge, at least my time in Hamilton County, we've never, like, at the end of a year, taken a stockpile day just because we didn't use it.
And since I'm new, has there been an increase over the years in how many professional development days, or does it just feel like that to our educators?
It's going back and forth. I think we've increased in this calendar in the last couple from previous years, but for example, when I first came here, we had, there was one year where I think we had 6 professional development days at the beginning of the calendar, and so it's kind of bounced back and forth. One of the things that makes it feel that way is the last few years, those half days, when we went through with HCA and talked about this was a strategy to allow additional planning for teachers.
Okay.
And actually, one year we had 7, we had 6, and then a student registration day,
True.
and then another one after that, so.
Okay. Was that your comment?
No.
Okay. Go
And
ahead.
looking at the calendar, I want to make sure I understand this right. Both our fall break and our spring break are going to be at the end of, fall break at the end of Q1 and spring break at the end of Q3?
There's actually a week in between the end of Q3 and spring break.
Oh.
That's what I asked last week, last month.
Wait, what?
That was the exact question I asked last month, if the calendar was going to be at the end of Q3 for spring break, where it needs to be.
We
I thought
we
were.
did discuss that at last month.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
What changed and why?
So we actually didn't change that. It's marked on here as the 14th, right? And so there is a week between that. I've been in discussions with Blake a little bit about how we can best utilize that week to really see, like, what is it? Could we use it as some kind of catch-up spaces, or how can we really make sure of that? The other alternative is to move spring break up to that week of the 17th. That's a fairly early spring break, to be quite honest, and we could adjust if you needed.
I would only say that I have heard basically unanimous feedback that the best time for spring break is in between quarters 3 and 4 for learning, for not getting started or trying to take a test before, all of the above, just everything you can think of. Just makes the most sense.
Sure.
You want to change that too and bring us a new copy?
I will. I think I can do this one. Yes. Sure.
I mean, if that's the will of the board, just make a motion to move it to the 17th, and we can adjust the physical calendar.
So
based
we
on
would
that
amend
motion.
it during the next session.
Correct.
Okay.
I'd like to move that we.
We're not voting right now.
Ouch.
No.
Go ahead, say it, Tiffany. There's another newbie for you.
Y'all are killing it today. Great job. Okay,
So-
and then we have our events and announcements.
Hold on just a minute. So the calendar there, that means they're going to have I'm just trying to keep this straight. The end of the quarter's there, okay, and then they're going to have spring break that next week, and then the kids will go to school for 1 week and then be off again on a Monday for professional development.
That's a good catch.
Yeah.
I would recommend that if you do move spring break, then you move that professional development day to the 24th instead of the 31st.
Yeah, I start to say
Good
that's
catch.
just so hard on parents to
I
get them to
agree.
school and off and get them to school.
I agree. Mr. Connor?
Are we done with that? Because that mine's after that. Calendar.
Are there any more comments on the calendar? No? Okay, Mr. Connor?
So, since I embarrassed myself already, I went ahead and spoke to legal counsel, and I am going to ask that discussion of the budget be added to the agenda as an amended item.
I second.
And what that means is when we vote on the agenda, it will include this amended item in front of us.
Great.
And what I just asked for.
Great. So you'll just do that at the time of our
Yes.
approval of the agenda, and then Mr. Keene, you'll just second it. Okay?
And can I make a comment?
Yes, absolutely.
So, we've been talking about this, and it's well, I'm disappointed that in some of the discussion yesterday in the county commission, and I know that, so the one thing, we finally get the state to give us money that's owed to us as a board, and I wish the county would see that as something that has no effect on them and what they give us, but now they're looking that since the state's giving us more money, they feel like now's the time for them to give us less money. And so I just thought we needed to discuss some of the budget items again before next week's vote in the county commission.
So I'm gonna suggest, like, let's just pause on this discussion, take a 5-minute break, come back at 6, and then we'll start our voting agenda, and we should have plenty of time to have this discussion if we can breeze through. So.
And I have one request. Sherry, can you order everyone one of these Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised and brief?
I request the Dummy's Guide of Robert's Rules for Orders.
I will say if you have Cliff Notes, like, definitely.
No,
get
I
Cliff
don't.
Notes
They need
version.
to read it. Like we talk about literacy, they need to read the book.
Okay.
Was it
All right.
written by Louis L'Amour?
Yeah. Okay. Let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back. Thank you.